right, hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Osint Bunker podcast, which definitely isn't going to end up being a mess. Today is a really interesting time to do this, and I think we are all very acutely aware why. Even the most casual of follower probably is aware. We've brought in a few people to kind of help us talk about the Middle East in what we hope is an understandable manner. We have David from Aurora Intel, who is going to be providing us with some of the more, at least Israeli or official view, along with a bunch of the debunking that he's been doing over the past, 2 weeks, really, that you've kind of been nailing in on it. Though I think, frankly, I have too, and pretty much everyone from the Osint community has to a degree. And we also have noted podcast guest member Aleph, who, just of note, we actually ended up missing a podcast recording window with him, I think a bit over a month ago now, and but he's here now to help us understand a bit more as well. So I think let's just lead into it.
Yeah,
and the problem is, where do you start?
Indeed.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I very specifically did not continue talking there because trying to nail down a place, that's understandable here, that doesn't have us talking back to I don't know, 5000 BC.
Yeah.
Is difficult.
Yeah, I think we have to be pragmatic in our approach here, and for the community that are going to be listening to this, is there are those who will not have the history and will not. I'm not saying everybody won't, right? And everyone's opinion will be slightly different because what they read and how they interpret things, and this is always going to be a problematic thing when you come to these kind of podcasts. But I think we have to be pragmatic and know that most people are listening to this who are going to be coming from really the October 7th timeline, aren't they, in that regard?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think it is sometimes difficult for people to contextualize some of the older events if they don't exactly have as much familiarity with the entire situation. It's not exactly something that you can just really come into easily. Just because, and I'm probably going to say the word complexity 15 times or some variation of the word. Because it is truly a situation where I think we can lay out the baseline that both Israelis and Palestinians committed horrific acts against each other for, at minimum, since the 1930s, basically, is when the level of violence really ramped up, before the end of the British Mandatory period. And the violence ended up escalating to such a degree over the next 17 years that it ended with the British just giving up, in effect, and handing things over to the UN and saying, well, good luck, everyone. We hope you have a fun time with us. And I think that really sort of has seeded, and this isn't blaming the British, because frankly the work that they did before the end of the mandatory period was heroic with the resources that they had, even if it led to where we are today, and led to, obviously events like the Nakba and the first war, and then the second one and the third one, and on and on. But I really think that, just to summarize it, both sides have done the standard Middle Eastern approach of, let's just kill everyone who disagrees with us, and if there's a bit of ethnic cleansing, it's kind of a side effect. I can name, good lord, probably 10 groups off the top of my head that have, just in the Middle East alone in the last 100 years, that have seen some level of ethnic cleansing. And yeah, I mean, I think everyone here can agree that is kind of the general baseline to approach the situation from.
say it's a pretty fair summary in that respect. I appreciate you not blaming the Brits as I stand here in Britain right now, so I'll take that on the chin. Thank you very much. I'm going to get that out there and say that no, I don't live in Israel, because everybody seems to think I do. I live in Britain, but most people who have followed us for long enough on Aurora Intel seem to have grasped that. So
yeah, no, I think most of us here have a level of background. I mean, I lived in Israel. Aleph is also incredibly familiar with the region, and it comes to the level where the more you study it, the more confusing things become.
Mm.
And frankly, that is truthful for a lot of people actually physically on the ground. There is a lot of nuance that people approach the situation with.
but I think that this war from the 7th of October is unique in our life, right? Let's be realistic. We've seen skirmishes. We've been, we saw, the war in 2014. But this is in a whole different scale to what we've seen before, and I think that is also amplified by the world that we live in now, which is in the sense of it's very social media driven. We've seen with, I know you didn't want to talk on Ukraine and Russia, but we use it as an example where we saw the Osint community and how people interact with information and data out there on the internet in a different light. And because this is such a heavily politically charged, emotionally charged topic of conversation, we have seen this in a whole different way to anything we've ever seen before.
No, absolutely. And I think that even if you look at the events pre-2006, so if you look at the last war in Lebanon, events there were a bit more sort of constrained. You really only saw a ground invasion in the tail end of the war. It was very much, not that much maneuvering, and a lot of not as many civilians were involved. Even going back to the intifadas, and peace processes, compared to the events of the 7th, those were very minor and spread out. Even though the individual attacks of terror there were not minor, any individual one was fairly large. But I think that to a degree we have not seen this level of just turbocharged violence against civilians from either side since 48, 50. Like there really isn't like a baseline for this. I don't think since then. And this is just kind of the end result, or depending on what actions the Israelis take, the end state of sort of the existence of Hamas.
Yeah, I think we can all, we can all agree that the atrocities that happened on October the 7th are absolutely horrendous. I think that goes without saying, and what we've seen also coming out of Gaza, where civilians are caught up in it as well, is absolutely as equally as horrendous. It's not going to get any. It's not going to get any easier. And those civilians are caught in the crossfire of a horrendous situation. I can't put it into words. I think that's the difficulty. Is there's no easy way to put it. You can't. You just can't.
No, it isn't, and it's a situation where the Israelis have kind of been put into a corner in a sense that they have to act. Like, I mean, you have Hamas killing probably around 1,500 or 1,400 to 1,500 civilians. You have, just acts that were committed on the 7th in such a small space of time. Like, it is ridiculous how many civilians were killed in like a 4-hour period, basically,
Yeah.
like a 4 to 6 hour period. That's when most of these atrocities took place.
Yep.
And
because they targeted, actually they reached the first kibbutz that they could, including Berry, including Ashdod, and lots of other kibbutzes. So they did as much as they could before they get neutralized. So I mean, that's apparently, that seems to be their goal, and they kind of achieved that.
yeah, no. From an objective, tactical, and military sense, Hamas, and even from a political sense, because of what they managed to do, every single objective they set out to do on the 7th was achieved. Like, beyond probably what their reasonable expectations were.
I was about to say, I think they did. I think they did more than they expected. I think they were way more successful than they ever thought they were going to be in what they wanted to do.
The reputational
Absolutely.
damage to Israeli intelligence has been quite strong from this too.
It was a complete failure in the Israeli intelligence, right? And it prides itself, and there's always an opinion, right? In that there always has been an opinion in the public eye, and those who oppose Israel, that Mossad are seen as the best, if not one of the best in the world, and it completely tore that wall and that image down.
No, absolutely. And even if you look, and I know this has been, an accusation that's been thrown around that, Mossad and the Israeli government knew what was going to happen. Which I find that one really, really hard to believe, just because it is really hard to foresee an event like that happening and getting a bunch of people to basically turn their back and say, who cares if we have a bunch of civilians die. I think that we will probably see in the postmortems that the Israeli intelligence community does. I don't think it'll be released publicly. I do not think we'll have something similar to the 9/11 commission. Maybe there will be, a call for heads, and we'll see some level of public investigation, but I really don't think the end result will release that much information. But if you
there will be
look at what
resignations
happened,
at a minimum,
absolutely,
right?
yes.
There has to be, fundamentally, right? They failed. It's as simple as that. They failed.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you look at, and I'm still trying to veer us back on topic, but if you look at what happened before 9/11, there was a sense that something was coming, but no one had, or no single person had enough of the information collated. No single team had enough of the information collated that they could directly ID what was coming. Definitely everyone individually knew, everyone's talking about something coming, something's going to happen, but things get lost in the noise. And I am absolutely sure that is what happened with the Mossad.
There's a thing here that, after 9/11, the TSA regulations and standards have changed. Well, I assume Israeli army was not, at least the Southern Command was not prepared for such a thing, because as you may know, Hezbollah was trying to actually do such a thing. They were conducting maneuvers, literally the same ideology, except the paragliders. They were following the same exact things. During all of their exercises, they were motorcycle. Actually, they were bikers. There were they were trucks. There were the same guerrilla warfare that Hamas did in, as you said, let's say 4 or 5 hours, which was actually more. I mean, if we count the clearing the cities. I'm sorry. So I assume the Southern Command was not as ready as the Northern Command regarding such a strategy and such a blitz as an attack to be prepared. The border forces were not, I assume they were not trained properly for facing such a uh, I don't know what to call it, uh, s- such a kind of attack. I mean, the northern are pretty much better, I assume, because Hezbollah showed that they are prepared for doing such a thing. But the southern was that way, and as Dave mentioned, it was a definitely a failure, and also, but I assume the lots of things are and have affected this thing, including it was a Sabbath, and there was no ongoing conflict that came out of blue. So yeah, of course the intelligence agencies have to be blamed for sure, but I assume the forces that were positioned and they were deployed at the border were not ready. They were ready for something like a riot, like demonstrations as they call it. But for such a big kind of operation with all those trucks, with the attacks they started with lots of things, and they started it with rocket attacks. I assume they started that for making the border forces to let's go with going for the shelters, or at least laying down on the ground for a few minutes. I mean, this was a very, very perfectly planned thing. And as Iran says, they're not involved. I assume this is a strategy that is beyond the capabilities of Hamas.
To a degree, but at the same time, Hamas has shown the ability to at least put together a level of planning that, you could see something like this coming from. But at the same time, and it goes to Southern Command again, that previous Hamas actions were primarily focused on cross-border raids, small kidnap operations, nothing major, nothing where they were actually putting together a force that could go immediately toe-to-toe with local Israeli forces and beat them.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the best achievement they had, like something that you can call genius, was doing those flagpole bombings and such. But this was beyond Hamas. I mean, there was the image that people had from Hamas was not this, and yeah, they got what they could, and they killed as much as they could, and they conducted their operation. And as you mentioned, as Dave mentioned, this is way more successful as anyone could imagine that could be achieved in like 4 or 5 hours. And there
No,
were
and going, sorry, go ahead.
no, go on, go on.
And going back to that level of success, it has forced in a way or cornered the Israeli government into a level of response that then further basically allows Hamas to achieve their goals. It has, the Israeli response by and far has alienated themselves with pretty much all of the Middle East. The Saudis are still being pretty quiet on what's happening, and the UAE to a degree as well, but the rest of the Middle East, even Iraq, Egypt, the Jordanians at large, well, to a degree the Jordanians at large, and beyond the Middle East as well. I think this is probably the most anti-Israeli sort of demonstrations and sort of anti-Israeli action that we've seen in a while in the West.
Because something was added to the equation, and that's the increasing amount of social platforms, including TikTok, and Twitter got more popular, and so on and so on. I mean, we had on 2019, if I remember correctly, it was November or May, when Israel attacked the building that Baha Abu Atta from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group and assassinated him, well, there were no. The type of the reactions were not this much wide, and you couldn't see this much of this information as well. And we are seeing campaigns right now against both sides, including the Palestinian sides and Israeli side. I'm seeing lots of different uh, online fronts. So the actually definitely the reaction, the international reaction, can be affected by these uh, online activities and social activities on internet, and it can bring people on the streets. The amount that we are seeing, the amount of airstrikes and artillery strikes on Gaza, especially in the northern side. In Beit Lahia, in Jabalia, in the center of the Gaza city, not the strip, the city itself. Uh, it's well, if we do a like a total count, yes, it is way bigger than 2019, 2021. But Israel announced that this is going to be something bigger and longer, and it's a response to something way bigger, and something that with one Israeli killed, there is a smaller response for sure, but this one was over, as you mentioned, 1400. So the type of the response is has changed, as well as well. I assume the cabinet knows that the administration knows that if they don't respond properly first, this can repeat again, either from the southern front or from the northern front. And
And
also there could be a vacuum, a political vacuum in Tel Aviv, because people won't be happy if there's no proper response, especially with the promises and with the vows that the government has already done and has already made, that we are going to wipe Hamas off the planet, off the earth. I assume Israel is in a bad situation, is in a bad uh, circumstance to. Uh, it has to fulfill its promises. On the other hand, it has to save its reputation, and we are seeing they're dropping papers, they're dropping banners to say move towards south and such, because they don't want to lose what they achieved in the past 3-4 years, including the normalization agreements with Bahrain, with United Arab Emirates, and they're looking forward to make a, not, let's not call it a peace agreement, but normalizing their relationships with Saudi Arabia. So I assume Israel has to take as much as cautions as it can, but still, it's a very, very hard way to take. Still, I stand with Dave's point with uh, about the mistakes that Mossad made, which led to all these things that happened in 15 days so far.
The more we look at this situation, the more it parallels with 9/11, as you say. For Israel, the events of October 7th were their 9/11, and like 9/11, we have obviously seen there has been some sort of major intelligence failure, as we've already mentioned, but we're also now seeing a response that, to all intents and purposes, mirrors the US response to 9/11. They now are dealing with that anger and that grief of what arguably they didn't really see coming, and now they kind of have to act, and they have to face up to the threat on their border. In this case, obviously for the US it was a little further away, but they have to face this threat, and they have to deal with it in a way that, as Aleph says, they have to try and maintain their reputation. They have to try and maintain a level of sort of respect and so on from the international community, but they also have to deal with their own audience, their domestic audience, and be seen to act in such a way as to ensure that this never happens again.
I mean, could you imagine, right, if there hadn't been that response from the IDF, right? Let's, you break and we break it down, right? If they it took them what 3 days, 72 hours to get things under control. Imagine if that had taken, a week, right? Could you imagine the extra devastation that group of people would have done to civilians? The things that we see and that we hear that are coming out. And I'm not distracting from the fact that civilians are suffering in Gaza right now. And they are, right? That's fundamental. But could you imagine if Israel hadn't responded in any sense of form, or couldn't have got control over it? That would have been, it's a massacre as it stands, and we're comparing it to 9/11. But could you imagine how that would have continued to have gone on and on and on? It wouldn't have stopped, right? This was a mob mentality, backed by a terrorist organization. They have successfully done one of the biggest terror attacks the world has ever seen in our lifetime as it stands.
Yeah, and I think the 9/11 comparisons are probably a bit subpar, especially to what it's done to the Israeli psyche. And drawing direct relations, I mean, if you look at the U.S. response to 9/11, bar the invasion of Iraq, because that's kind of a bit separate, on its entire thing. If you look at the actions that were taken in Afghanistan, super targeted, super successful. Even if you look at the early Iraq War, super targeted, super successful, very quick regime change. Things didn't melt down for a bit. Bad conclusion, as the left said. If you look at the immediate IDF response to the events of the 7th in Gaza, there is a level of punitive response that can be seen. They are
anger.
Destroying
it's anger.
It's anger. They are destroying some neighborhoods for basically the sake of destroying the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And I think we didn't see that in the U.S. 9/11 response because, if looking at the total population percentage that was affected, I mean, sure, yes, tons of people in New York knew someone that was very directly affected by 9/11 or even killed by 9/11. Man, if you look at Israel after the 7th, like I knew people who were killed. Like, and I lived in Israel for, frankly, a very short amount of time. Like, everyone knows someone who died. Like, it is so incredibly deeply damaging to the Israeli people, like, as a whole. Like, very deeply. And that's one of the reasons why
there's a difference here. The population in Gaza and the population density in Gaza is not comparable with Afghanistan, and either and neither with Iraq. I mean, the amount of people that are living in one neighborhood is not really comparable with what's going on in Gaza. Also, Hamas knows that what they're doing. They were previously videos that they are using civilian infrastructure to launch their missile, launch their rockets. I mean, yeah, it can be some there can be some angry airstrikes, angry attacks, or blind attacks, but there's a huge difference here.
Yeah, I think sorry for interrupting you there, Dave, but it's like I've never had to explain so many times what a roof knock is, right? And today I saw footage of a tower getting knocked down, and I actually haven't checked which one it was, but there was a line of people still standing recording this tower before it got hit by two JDAMs, and I'm sitting there going, they're still doing roof knocks. People clearly know these buildings are coming down still. The footage is there in the open, and you look to where we were 2 weeks ago. People are now understanding, that a lot of these stuff there is warnings, right? The leaflets, the telephone calls, the text messages, the roof knocks. There's all these mechanisms that have been put in place, to minimize that. And just to go back a little bit, and I apologize, just to go back to this whole 9/11 thing. I think the other difference with the Iraq and Afghan piece is it wasn't quite on America's door right? This is a border that we're talking about here. I appreciate that, you know, you had extremists within the country, right? And that's a different kind of thing. But Iraq and Afghan didn't border Israel. There wasn't just a bit of concrete and a fence in between them, right? It's a different scenario. And
Yeah.
I think we need to be mindful of that as well. You're literally dealing with people who were in the country with guns, killing, slaughtering, doing horrific things, who were there right in front of you, basically. Which is, as with Iraq and Afghanistan, it was in quotations over there.
No, absolutely. And if you look at, you know, what Hamas's messaging has been, it's we're gonna do it again. They're incredibly clear that this is their mission. They completed it, and if they have the chance to do it again, they will obviously take it. And the Israelis are well aware of that threat. Well, at least today they are. That is not necessarily an existential threat to the Israeli state, but a massive threat to the well-being of Israelis in the South.
Mm.
In
Hamas has one goal. It wants to eradicate Israel.
Yeah.
It's very clear on that.
And that isn't like that isn't, you know, a goal they're you know, nebulous about. That isn't us, you know, saying everyone who says from the river to the sea, you know, wants to kill every Jew. No, that's like exactly what Hamas has said they want. Yeah. They want to kick every single Jew out of the Levant, and they wish to destroy the state of Israel. That is named goal.
And the river to the sea thing, right? It's and that, you know, we've seen some scenes from London and I'm going to say Sweden in general, because I can't remember where it was in Sweden. We saw things, you know, we've seen people chanting that, right? And I don't think they actually understand what they're chanting. They don't realize that's what they're actually saying either.
Yeah, no, from the river to the sea is literally a message of ethnic cleansing. Like,
yes.
Period, end of story. That is what it is. Like, people can try to claim, oh no, you know, it's about liberation for Palestinians.
Yes.
And like, no. Like free Palestine is a great message, you know. It has some connotations, but it's much less about the whole, you know, let's go kill all the Jews part of things.
That is their goal. That is what defines them. The image in their the picture in their flags, in their emblems are quite certain about it. I mean, the Iranian regime that is backing them has a square in the center of Tehran called Palestine Square, previously known as Koch or Palace before the Islamic Revolution, and they have a counter that says this much days are left to the end of till the end of the they say Zionist regime. This is actually based on one of the Khamenei, the Iranian supreme leader's talks, that said Israel won't see the next 25 years. And well, this is what Hezbollah is trying to do, what is Palestinian Islamic Jihad is trying to do, and what is Hamas was trying to do and is trying to do and will do if it remains as a so-called resistance group. And you know, this is not going to end here. Well, they are pretty much aligned with each other. From you know, the UAV strikes, the rocket attacks on Ain al-Assad, on Harir, on the Syrian bases are pretty much aligned. They were silent for over a year. I'm talking about the Iraq attacks, and well, they all started together, even though that the Iranian regime announced that we didn't order Hamas to do that, but we support their cause. And the you know, Khamenei's one of the most important Khamenei's advisors, Shamkhani, said that this is a precise example of a legitimate self-defense. As well as on the national TV of Iran, I was listening to them. They literally said that in the streets of Gaza, there won't be Hamas members who are only Hamas members. They are people who are trained. But I'm not talking about civilians. I'm talking about Gaza members. They said there are people who are trained by the IRGC to fight. So this whole thing about uh, they want to eradicate Jews and, as they say, send them back to Europe is not just a is not just an empty threat. This is their goal, and it remains their goal as long as they have the guns in their hands.
No, absolutely. And like they are not, they don't waffle around about that. That's like that is not something that anyone in Hamas will really disagree with. Like sure, if you see the leader of Hamas going on Saudi television and talking about, the interview that he did was honestly, frankly, massive props to the Saudi anchor, and I do not remember her name specifically. But she drilled in very accurately on, what are your beliefs? And yeah, his answers were pretty clear on what the intention was, so what if, well, correction, apart from the denial that any civilians were killed, his general message was, so what? This is
You know
this
what?
is our mission.
This is a belief that they have. I see it on Arab and Persian social media. I'm not talking about normal people. I'm talking about the people who are against Israel. I'm talking about the accounts that are affiliated with IRGC and with, well, other militant groups that are in contact and are being supported by IRGC. That they say this is clear. I'm quoting this. They say there is no civilian in Israel. This is their belief. So when you and I are saying civilians were killed, they saying there is no civilian in Israel. We killed occupiers. This is precisely the thing that they say and they claim and they do. So when they are
No, I even
when they're monkey dancing on a dead on a dead woman's body, this is what they believe, that they believe that you are not you yourself, that person that they are doing all these things to, and the group of people that they are doing these things to are not civilians. They don't believe they're civilians.
well, it's not just that, but I mean, again, Arabic language Twitter is absolutely fucking unhinged, absolutely insane place to be on. Um, but I mean, the general view, or not, I don't like to generalize because it's social media and social media is always crazy. But the it has to be wiped out. That the existence of Israel is incompatible.
And it's worrying, particularly in the West, where we are seeing so much for support. Particularly in the last 2 weeks, we've seen so much in the way of protests. Obviously, as David mentioned earlier, London has been a particular focal point in the West for some of these protests.
True.
You look at London, right? And we're going to use as an example, right? And I'm going to home in on what you're saying there. It's like, I think it was the Guardian yesterday or 2 days ago put an article up saying that anti-Semitism has risen 1,500% in the UK in 2 weeks alone. That is horrendous, right?
Yeah.
That is a stat that should be just not even exist, right? Simple as that, foremost. And then you see photos going around from the London protest, and I think it was a piece of cardboard stood up that said Hamas was right, or something like that. And it's like, how is that person even, that is someone who is standing in the middle of London praising a terrorist organization, and we have a tweet up on the internet saying, "Hi, can you help us find this person?" Why wasn't it dealt with? Why was it left to 24 hours later? That just shouldn't happen in this world. Everybody has a right to their religion. Everybody has a right to how they want to live their life. And that's just not happening anymore. You've got people scared to walk through the streets.
And well, in Iran, 3-4 days ago, they entered one of the I'm not Jewish, so I'm not familiar with these references. One of the Jewish prophets, as they say, and they burned the Israeli flag in the vicinity of that tomb of that prophet, which is a very holy site for Jewish people in Iran. So this is not going to stop as long as it, as someone, as some group, and as some community stops it somehow, put a stop on it. No one will.
Yeah. I
I will
think
stop right here.
innocent people on both sides are suffering here, right, around the globe. Muslims,
Okay.
Jews, everyone's going to suffer from this. It's
No,
it's yeah.
absolutely. This is probably the most horrifying situation because you have a group whose main goal is killing one group of people, and one of their, methodologies to doing it is basically killing their own people to do so, um, either directly or indirectly. Um, where and they commit an act that's so heinous, that causes a second group to throw away some of the basic provisions for the protection of civilian life that we've seen. And so, yeah, it results in a horrifying situation.
I live in Turkey, and where I live, there was a store. This is very off topic, but I'm just pointing it out. There was a store that had a very not a very good grammar, but an A4 paper with a handwritten Hebrew about their business, just to attract Israeli tourists. And I noticed that they removed that piece of paper after withering like a week ago. I mean, this is how unsafe people, even local people who are just dealing and having business with normal Jewish people, apparently speaking Hebrew is a dangerous thing these days. I'm seeing these things with my own eyes, and just imagine how people who are wearing kippas in the world are feeling right now.
And it's
Sorry, I need to
Go
I
on.
need to drop in a minute, but I just wanted to say, look, we've been talking now for 55 minutes, right? Give or take, and it's kind of like we haven't even scratched the surface of this, right?
Yeah.
There's so much more we could go into right now, and I think that from my perspective, right, on this is when when Technical did the introduction earlier on, right, and we talked about it being complex. This really shows how complex this is. We're 55 minutes in, and we haven't even got into the intricate details of what is really even going on the ground now, 2 weeks
Oh no,
in.
we haven't even finished scratching the surface of this
No,
situation.
Yeah.
I haven't even touched
yeah.
on the media side of it yet.
Yeah, I haven't even touched on the you talked about disinformation earlier on, where we're looking at videos of that are coming from like Sudan, or that are coming out from 2 years ago in Iraq, or a stray dog who's shivering, getting food is being portrayed as a dog, and it's like the amount of stuff that there is to talk about in this. It just shows how unbelievably difficult this situation currently is.
Yeah. And we've got to remember as well, there's this whole discussion at the moment around proportionality of response from Israel. And I did put it out as a tweet not that long ago, but the question that a lot of us have to consider, and that I don't really think there is a genuine answer to, is Israel is facing a group of people who desperately want to see its destruction. They want to see the complete elimination of the Jewish people, of the Israeli people. We're not just talking Jews here. That there have been Arabs and various other ethnic groups in Israel who have been subject to the target of these attacks on October 7th and since. And there are a number of casualties who are not Jewish. And it's been very...
you've seen the Bedouin, right? The Bedouin are up in arms as well. There was actually some Palestinians who were killed as well. You've got Thai, you've got all these multinational people that are workers and community members and everybody. It's an international thing.
Yeah.
And I was going to say calamity. I don't even know if calamity is even the right word. It's just an international situation that there is no end in sight to at this moment in time.
And
No, and
Israel
at this
has
point, the people suffering are going to be the Palestinians in Gaza. That those Palestinian civilians are the ones now at this point bearing the brunt of this.
yeah.
And a lot of them really don't have the best option out of it. Like what are they supposed to do? Try to, corral themselves or try to travel south in Gaza? Like when Hamas is preventing them from doing that, and when Egypt keeps the Rafah border closed, and when Israelis have made it pretty clear that they're going to level a good portion of Gaza City, like there's
Let me
we,
clear
we
something. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I don't know if you know about Rafah, the border with Egypt. But if you look at left of Rafah, the west side of Rafah, you would
well, there's
know.
nothing there.
Precisely. That's what I'm thinking about. That maybe the Egyptian government right now doesn't have the proper infrastructure for hosting this much people. So
Well,
there might
no.
be.
I mean, the Egyptian government is pretty clear that they don't want more Palestinian refugees. I mean, they've been, frankly, honestly, very, very clear that they
I
don't. If
assume
you'd seen,
I assume we can add something else that Egypt doesn't want to take the risk to take more Hamas members in their country in the name of refugees, because we saw activities of Hamas members in Sinai in northeastern Egypt near the Israeli and Gaza borders. So I assume that it's not just about the humanitarian problem. It's just that they are afraid of their own national security matters too.
Sorry, well, I'm going to drop, but thank you very much for the
no, and
invite.
thank you so much for coming on to help us.
No, I'll listen to the rest of this later on, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
See you, mate.
Bye.
But as I was trying to
well-
say, the issue we've got is that Israel has to somehow work out what a proportionate response is to what they face. And as I say, the Israeli state is facing a threat that wants to see its complete destruction. It wants to eliminate the state of Israel. And I don't know that there is necessarily a proportionate response to that. What do you do to survive? Where do you draw the line between a reasonable amount of force to use in order to survive, and where is going beyond that? I don't think that's a sort of a line that anyone can really draw at the moment.
The other problem is that the stated goal, or one of the goals, not stated actually, of your enemy is to make it so it is politically impossible for you to survive as well. And if you look at what Hamas wants, they want the Israelis to cause as many civilian casualties as possible.
Yeah.
They want the Israeli government to alienate itself. The Israeli government seems pretty okay with doing that at the moment, with their current strike sort of planning. They have taken some actions, as Aleph has said, roof knocks and other things, but still the consequences of losing your house to an airstrike is still pretty significant. And I mean, we've seen that with bulldozing actions in the West Bank. That there's a degree to the consequences that aren't just human. They're long term. They're economic. They're sociological. They're physical.
Yeah.
There are these long term impacts where there's a reason why Hamas doesn't want people to evacuate south.
Yeah.
There's a reason why, if you look at the general media environment that Hamas has fostered within Gaza, among young civilians, it is well, if an Israeli airstrike kills you, the Israeli airstrike kills you. It is what it is.
Can I jump in middle? First, about the West Bank, about the bulldozer thing. They need a court order, so this is not an imminent or immediate reaction when they find the terrorist's house or his family's house. I'm saying
I mean,
his.
I've talked with lawyers who've argued in front of these courts. I mean, it's not a rubber stamp, but it's pretty close to a rubber stamp.
Yeah, if it's proven that that particular house belongs to a terrorist, it usually gets demolished somehow. But
And usually, if it's associated as well,
true,
that can also result in demolishment.
that is true. And also, I mean, with the beginning of the approval for airstrikes in the West Bank since June, if I remember correctly, uh, the type of the responses have changed somehow. Uh, we saw an airstrike in Jenin, in or Nablus. I'm not sure actually. I was pretty sleepy. Last
That
night.
seemed to be directly related to a raid, though, as well.
No, no, I'm talking generally. I'm talking about the whole kind of the actions that Israel is capable of at the moment. I mean, it's not the things that we see in the social media. Israel has nuclear bombs and it can nuke Gaza or blah blah blah. I'm talking about the things that are legit to the state of Israel, and they are doing it at the moment. But I believe that what is Israel doing right now, I'm talking about the air strikes, I'm talking about the artillery strikes, are just a portion of what is coming in the coming days. I'm not saying weeks, because I believe that with all the warnings that they are sending to the citizens of Gaza, especially the northern parts. I'm talking about the Beit Hanun, I'm talking about the Beit Lahia and so on. Uh, it seems that what is coming for Gaza is nothing in comparison with what's going on right now, and I assume they have the support of the majority of the Israeli people, because they are pissed off. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that in the podcast. They are they are not happy with what's going on. Remember, who said that everyone knows someone who's dead? It was you. It's the same thing in Israel too, because someone's nephew, someone's cousin, someone's friend's friend got killed around the kibbutzes near the Gazan
No, that's what I
border.
was talking about. Everyone knows someone who's been killed.
True. One of the people who was killed in Gaza was my Facebook friend. We played Facebook games back then, like 4 or 5 years ago together, and I knew him not personally, but we talked. We exchanged some information. We exchanged some news, and he was not a Hamas person or such a thing. I also know someone who died from what Hamas started since October 7th. But I assume that Israel is pretty much serious about the plan that they announced about wiping Hamas off the earth.
No,
Again,
certainly,
it's
and the problem is, well, at least with the current Israeli government, is that the individuals in power have an idea of what they want to happen. Um, Maybe not necessarily the best idea of if they can do it. Like, again, their stated goal is Hamas is basically ISIS, or Hamas is ISIS, and they want to destroy Hamas. Um, I I have doubts that is in any way, shape, or form possible. People, want to talk about, oh, well, the Israelis are gonna, genocide Gaza. I mean, they can't. Like,
no.
it's not possible. Like, that's kind of beyond the capabilities of Israel. Um, like just actual practical capabilities, getting past, any want or desire to do so. Like, the capability of actually doing it just isn't there.
Yeah.
True.
And
They've but if you look at back in 2005, 2006, with the disengagement from the Gaza Strip, the Israelis basically moved everyone who all the Israelis who lived there on the various kibbutzes, left all the infrastructure in place and moved them out of the strip, and basically went forward and allowed the people of Gaza and as part of the peace plan, the West Bank, plans to self-govern. They kind of blessed the elections that were going to happen. And what ended up happening was Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, killed all the Fatah members, and proceeded to turn it into basically a militant state, independent of the West Bank. Because the Gaza Strip and the West Bank do not have any relations in any way, shape, or form. I mean, Hamas hates the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, especially in the West Bank, almost as much as they do Israel. And they then started basically in 2006 preparing for today, in effect, preparing for potential Israeli invasion and preparing to continue to commit acts against the Israeli state in order to move forward and push for its downfall. And I think a lot of the Israelis see that as, well, we disengaged. We gave them pretty much what they wanted. We moved our people out. We gave them a bunch of, of resources. And look at where that got us. And that is, from what I've seen, a prevailing Israeli view on the left. On the right. Now, if you look at some of the left in Israeli society, on some of the more, pro-coalition, two-state solution, your academics and a lot of the people who sort of move towards either a two-state solution or some solution with Palestinian self-governance and sort of a peaceful 90s style solution to the problem. You'll see them say that the blockade and that the other actions taken by the Israeli state didn't help. It fomented a level of resentment among the people of Gaza and the people of the Gaza Strip, and allowed Hamas to continue to grow and basically sabotaged any hopes of the PA and the more reasonable or more moderate elements like Fatah from actually being able to govern and sort of put together a government in any way, shape, or form that was reasonable.
To be honest, I won't call Fatah the Palestinian Authority a peaceful party, though.
This is in comparison to Hamas.
Yeah, true.
This is
but
yes, the Martyrs Fund exists,
Hamas,
and
Hamas has an arsenal of rockets, and well, in the West Bank, the parts that are under the control of PA don't have that arsenal. So I mean, it's the matter of the power, it's the matter of the weapon they're holding in their hands. So they have to act more like, let's say, act calmer somehow, because they don't have the proper weapons and so on. I mean, we saw, I don't know how much do you follow the West Bank news, but I do that like in a daily basis. So I see that lots of terrorists, what is being called terrorists, that are being neutralized almost every night. A lot of them are the members of the security forces of the Palestinian Authority. They are fighting the same way that the Hamas militias were fighting in the southern Israel near the Gazan communities. So, well, I don't want to imagine, but I can somehow imagine that if they had enough rockets to launch at the Israeli areas, Israeli cities, Israeli communities. I assume that when we don't have when we never tried that scenario that the Fatah is capable of launching rockets, we can't call the Fatah a way more civilized or calmer party.
I'm conscious of time, and we've obviously been going for a little while, but as we said at the start, this is a topic that we could really sort of discuss.
Let's tell these let's make it episodes and sell it to Netflix.
we could
Nope,
probably
no,
spend.
they would not touch this one with a 10-foot long
Yeah,
pole.
we could probably spend the next 3 or 4 hours continuing to sort of scratch the surface of this topic, really. But I think Israel needs to sort of have a real look at the situation and decide where it's going to be satisfied, because ultimately, as you said, technical, whether or not it's going to be possible for them to actually completely eradicate Hamas, I very much doubt they will. I think there are far too many complexities with that kind of an operation, and ultimately you're never going to be able to get rid of an ideology in quite that way. I think it's fair to say, the US and its allies spent 20 years in Afghanistan trying to get rid of the Taliban and trying to bring stability to that part of the world, and ultimately 20 years clearly wasn't enough. And I don't
But
think Israel will have any sort of, success in the same regard when it comes to Hamas. Even if Israel is successful in getting rid of the existence of Hamas in Gaza, there are still going to be Hamas members and Hamas supporters around the world, as we've seen in recent weeks, through the various protests in Western countries. And that's something that Israel has to recognise, and they're going to have to come up with a realistic sort of end game result that they are aiming for.
Certainly.
I do think you have to draw a distinction, because there are certainly Hamas supporters who are protesting in the West.
But this is going to be, do you have the same concept and definition of ISIS today as 2014? Do you?
Well, I mean, it's a completely different organization today than it was then.
They were ruling. They were holding cities. They had members. They had supporters everywhere. They still have. They still do. I assume that what could happen to Hamas will end Hamas if Israel fulfill its promises. What will be left from Hamas is going to be what is left from the ISIS right now. I mean, yes, of course there are ISIS members. They announce their own caliphate these days, but after this one, the other one comes and so on. But there is no Islamic State as they were holding cities in Iraq in 2014. So I assume that would be a huge achievement.
I mean, I think the problem right now in the Gaza Strip is Gaza does have home rule, objectively. Like, that is, Hamas is has the monopoly on power within Gaza. They have the monopoly of violence, and in general, they have executed on that for the past 18 years. Whereas there is a certain, or 18, about 18 years, where there is a certain level of disconnect, I think, is in how the Israelis want to get rid of an organization like Hamas. Because if you look at how ISIS was defeated, and ISIS, if you look at the number of fighters per square mile, ISIS was far less density than Hamas did. ISIS was defeated through a very slow direct action that took years. A lot of bombs, years and years and years, a lot of coalition deaths.
Thousands of sorties from Equatorial, from Qatar, from United Arab Emirates, from even from Turkey. So I'm talking about the what was that base? I don't know.
Let's be honest, like, a lot of the actions taken, especially in Iraq, to pacify the areas that were held by Hamas, some of the actions taken by PMUs really, if there was an independent war crimes investigation that went after what some of the PMUs did following, the fall of ISIS, especially in Ramadi and in the western Euphrates Valley, woof, yeah, no, I mean the actions taken were
Yeah,
fairly heinous and
because they were
nefarious.
documented, but because there were proper journalists in Iraq, thanks to the not thanks to the, but because of the Iraq war. But right now, have you ever heard a person, a journalist, I don't know, any individual who talks against Hamas and who's living inside Gaza? I mean, this there's a
No,
difference here that
there's
there is they had the movement that there was a hashtag on 2018 or 19. I'm not certain that the hashtag in English was "We want to leave." Uh, I had a bunch of tweets and threads about the whole situation and about the suppression of the people, and they were being held in let's call them underground prisons, and there is no one who can publicly announce their disagreement with Hamas or denounce Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. That is why Hamas is clearly using the people as human shields, because there is no disagreement. There is no you can't call it a democratic thing. I mean, in the West Bank, in the Palestinian Authority, there is also no democracy, because every time there is a so-called election, it gets postponed, possibly forever. But in Gaza,
there's a reason for that.
it's a million times worse. I mean, just find one person who is holding a camera and is standing against Hamas, and even after that,
Okay, but I
try
will
to
ask you
find
this
that
question.
person one day later.
If you held a snap election on October 6th in the Gaza Strip that was somehow independent with monitors, and there wasn't any, election rigging by Hamas, and it was a fair election on the 6th, right before what happened on the 7th, do you think Hamas would win in the Gaza Strip?
I think it would. Hello.
And that is a really hard thing for people to face
True.
on every single side.
Yeah.
Because A, it means the conditions of the Israeli blockade around, Gaza has increased popular support within the Strip for Hamas. It B means that a lot of Palestinians living in the Strip support Hamas and support what they want. And again, let me be clear here. Left's answer is not like off the top of his head. There's been opinion polling, and there's a very widely held opinion that Hamas holds a very wide base of support within the Strip. But there are all these ramifications from something that I don't think as many people are talking about, because if they do, either A, which it will be used in some places in Israel to support striking civilian infrastructure and hitting civilian targets, and so I think that drives a lot of fear when people decide to talk about it or try to talk about it, because they feel that it will legitimize to some degree, at least in the international space and domestically within Israel, actions against civilian targets. Which, again, I think I've said this 15 times on Twitter now, but killing civilians isn't okay. Like I
Of
have
course, I had the
really
same thing
really
on my Twitter
really
too.
yeah
But
like
when a senior commander of Hamas who is responsible for killing Israelis is hiding in a civilian structure, in a civilian building, in a tower, uh, uh, if you want to call it a war crime, this is Hamas's war crime, You know, I'm reading the war crime every minute under my tweets. So I kind of got used to it. But you know, when
And
they
that
are
is certainly an
militia is
argument.
hiding in a house that is not just his house, but lots of children are living inside it. This is not this is this is a wrong deed by the Hamas terrorists, not by the Israeli government. Of course, I'm not happy. I don't cheer. I publicly announced that I was actually confronted about it, that I don't cheer for the death of civilians, and I won't at all ever again, not again ever. But you know what is funny, that is it's always the ball is always in on Israel's court. No one sees that what has Hamas started, what is Hamas doing right now at the moment, where is Hamas hiding. You know, do you see any kind of let's say official base of Hamas in Gaza? Where is their defense ministry? Where is whatever they're calling it? They don't have any specific and any special place for their operations. It's not like the Matkal base in like the in the Tel Aviv. They don't have a specific place for putting their army, for putting their militants. So of course, all of them are, uh, you know, around all of Gaza Strip. So of course, when they are being targeted, there are casualties on the civilian side.
No, and you do hold a point there. That one of Hamas's largest strengths, if you can call it that, is the fact that they hide among civilians. Is that they launch from areas that are populated by civilians. I mean, there's footage of Hamas rock. It's literally coming out of someone's backyard in a populated area near Ramallah in the Al Shati camp. I think it was in that general area. I forget. I geolocated it, but it was coming from someone's backyard.
Yeah.
And oh shoot, just found it. Yeah, it was in the Al Shati camp area. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, there's a level of Israeli response that has to justify those civilian deaths. And not only from like the baseline international laws of war, yeah, we were, you know, conducting a necessary strike against an enemy combatant and we did everything we could to reduce collateral damage and civilian deaths, but there is a level of answering to the international community of, you know, oh well, you just killed 50 civilians to kill a single Hamas member. You know, how can you justify that? If he wasn't an active and sustained threat to your forces or to Israeli civilians.
It doesn't justify that. True, you're correct. But what if? I mean, it's just a what if. What if that person was responsible for ordering more uh, terror actions? I mean, you have to
No,
stop.
and more rocket attacks. Is it someone who, you know, you can justify that strike on? Is there that clear and present danger to your forces? And it goes back
Yeah.
to some of like the baseline tenets of international law. And yeah, if you look at international law in a vacuum, it's frankly fairly cruel and heartless in what it allows, and it was built on a lot of principles that yeah has evolved somewhat from World War II.
Are we talking about the Geneva Convention laws and?
Well, which yeah, I mean, in general, the international laws of war have been officialized through the Geneva
Uh-huh.
Conventions, which have kind of been steadily updated since the early 1900s. But if you look, and I actually have to find direct sections to quote here. Um, uh,
It comes back largely to the question of proportionality, as I said earlier. What does a proportional response to the events of the 7th of October actually look like? And it's going to be a different answer for different people, and it's obviously a balance that Israel has to find between, obviously, as you say, the way that international law is written and phrased, and between what is acceptable both to a domestic population and also to the international community.
I'm sorry. Uh, I assume the proper response that could be significant for Israel is that they have to act in a way to prevent further similar operations. I call them attacks
Hmm.
that they conducted on October 7th. So as I assume this is the proper thing, that as long as they have to go to stop and to prevent a similar action, I think they will go, and personally I think they have to go, because well, any country, any sane government would put its own people first before anything and any other state or any other nation or any other group. So
Well, I
I
mean,
think
so some countries do, some countries don't. Some countries do have the belief as the government is the extension of the will of the people, the will of the people's job is to protect the institution of the government. I think all countries believe that to some degree. I mean,
yeah, I
if you
added
look
the
at like the
sane in the
draft,
first of my phrase because of that. I mean, at least Israel, because it's a population. It's a matter of population. Uh, you gotta keep that small amount of people surrounded by the countries that you have a uh, kind of a dark history with, especially in 1960s and 70s. With, uh, I mean, it's Israel is basically surrounded by the nations that attacked her uh, less than let's say less than 60 years ago. So I assume that keeping your own people happy and protected is something that you have to root for, and Israel is rooting for, because well, you are not having as much as people as your neighbors.
I'm sorry. I'm currently trying to skim back over the 1949 Geneva Conventions relative to the protection of civilian persons in times of war. And yeah, good lord, 100 and something articles. Um, but in general, if you look at articles 13 and 32, civilians are to be protected from murder, torture, or brutality, and from the discrimination on the basis of race, nationality, religion, or political opinion. So if you look at what the international laws of war say, just because someone voted for Hamas or supported Hamas, which again, also if you look at the population curve of the Gaza Strip, pretty much no one was or almost no one was of voting age back, in 2006, or a very large chunk of the population just wasn't of voting age. Um, you know, there's
It was a
there are
takeover.
other
There was, well,
well,
it's
the
it's
elections that led to
really
a takeover and dumping people off the top of buildings. Um, but if you look at the Geneva Conventions, if you look at the Fourth Geneva Conventions, which are the ones of '49, protection of hospitals, protection of civilians, there's the general idea that the deaths of civilians should be um, should be avoided. Should be avoided at all costs, or not all costs, but all reasonable costs.
obvious.
Um,
But
and
can you find a uh let's say an office that holds Hamas seniors and Al Qassam, the military wing of Hamas seniors, uh, in one place? Can you find them in a? I mean, where is the commander of the IDF? Where is the chief of staff of the Israeli army? Who's where
yeah, no,
generally?
and again, it is very easy. The Israeli army operates out of very controlled points, and there isn't that level of ambiguity when it comes to targets. And as you said, that is something that Hamas curates very carefully. They want to ensure that every single Israeli strike to kill a Hamas fighter involves the deaths of civilians. That's
Yeah.
that is not a stated goal of Hamas. It's pretty clear that it's one of their goals. And so again, that puts the Israelis into a bad situation whenever they have to conduct an action against Hamas, and that's by design. Um, at the same time, though, the Israelis are at least right now fairly clearly taking actions. If you look at some of the mapping, and I can just pull up Sentinel, and see some of the destruction in the western part of Gaza City, and sorry, what's that apartment complex that they've basically just completely leveled at this point? Um,
Today,
no, I think they finished it yesterday. Um, I have to
there
go and
are
look back
lots
through
of
your.
buildings also. Today building was Musa Arafat.
No, it
Yesterday.
was like six. It was like 8 or 10 buildings. Um, that
Oh,
got
you're
knocked
talking about
down.
Az-Zahra.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I was mispronouncing a bunch. Um, but yeah, if you look at something like that, like, was there a Hamas target in every building? No. Was Hamas probably using the complex pretty heavily? Yeah, probably. Um,
But
and there
is there a
is
way to extract the Hamas terrorists out of those buildings? No, right?
no, but at the same time, is knocking all of them down a proportionate response? Also, probably not. There is a level of collective punishment ongoing there with what the
Yes, I
Israelis are
agree.
doing.
I completely agree. But we also saw that the precise strikes that just took out one of the units out of one apartment. I I'm not justifying the leveling of a whole uh residential complex, but uh, uh, I mean we saw it in the past 15 days that when it was possible, apparently Israel did that. I mean, we saw lots of images, videos, footage from what was happened when there was just one building, there was just one apartment in a building, and it was targeted quite precisely. Still, I'm not justifying, and I have no idea what was happening inside the Azahra complex, but uh, yes, it happened. It got leveled, and it reminds me the building of uh Jala buildings. In a building actually, it was just one in 2020 or 19. They build actually Al Jazeera had a office inside that building. It got roof knocked. They called the owner of the whole tower. After that, they destroyed it because apparently there were rocket launches from the building, and IDF published some footage that they were using the building as a Hamas HQ in several different levels and floors in the same building.
Oh
Actually, I
yeah, no,
can
that there
bring
was
them.
that's an instance that's been I don't know. A lot of accusations got thrown around in relation to how much they knew, um, what was going on. Um, I do think there is an aspect of, let this teach them a lesson, um, where
Hopefully,
where we where we do see, but like that's where things get really messy, in that sort of idea and principle of, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter if, we kill a few or a lot of civilians in this strike because they deserve it. That's where you cross the line. That's
no.
immediately.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, of
Yeah.
course, of course, of course. This can't be justified. Even one civilian death cannot be justified. But there's a curtain on the truth that this is Hamas's fault, not Israeli fault. I'm not saying that it's uh, it's not complete. Like it's something that Israel has 0% fault. Well, from the beginning of the October 7th, it could be prevented if there were proper oh caution and proper prevention and proper intelligence readiness for what was started. But uh, most of the thing is, I can say, like, with confidence, that over 90% of the thing that we are seeing civilian casualties is Hamas's fault. They are hiding between civilian areas, amongst people, amongst civilians. They are using on 2019, if I remember correctly, one of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad persons who was responsible for delivering the funds from Iran to uh, Peach terrorists was Hamed Khadari. His car, the delegation of his car, he's actually he's kind of, let's say motorcade, uh, got targeted in Gaza. There were no civilian casualties, just his vehicle got targeted by IDF UAV. But his car was moving amongst the civilian cars. I mean, just imagine that there were extra uh, casualties and they were civilians. Who would you blame? The terrorist who was hiding and moving and transporting amongst the civilians, or uh, the government or the army that conducted this strike? This is the whole thing that Hamas is using. Lots and lots, and let's not say all, but lots of civilian areas, mosques, schools, wherever they find to launch rockets, to conduct their operations, to use their communication, you know, let's not say towers, but for relays, for lots of things. And they are running, they're pretty much getting away with everything because there are civilian casualties. And also, let's not forget that a Hamas member who's sleeping in his own house, uh, the Palestinian community, it's kind of an Islamic belief that you have to, let's say, you have to be fruitful. So they also have children. They also have a wife or wives. So, I mean, even if you target that person directly and that person doesn't have neighbors, that person's family will get killed.
No, absolutely. And then that's, yeah, like just targeting someone's house. Oh, and other situations where we've seen, you know, the targeting or at least attacks against just structures that are known to be owned or occupied by Hamas members that they're the IDF pretty clearly isn't that sure whether or not they're there, or they just want to conduct a strike to serve as kind of a punitive action against that Hamas member. There really is a question there of
I wouldn't say that. I believe that Israel has enough uh, information from Gaza to obtain a target. Of course, there are errors, obviously.
well, I mean,
There were errors.
if they have that level of targeting information about the location of an individual, um, then there are strikes then that have been conducted against their homes and their families, um, where the IDF knows that they aren't present and still have conducted a strike.
Yeah, so
Against them.
we gotta jump back to the case of like Abu Atta, Abu Atta, the Islamic Jihad, actually super senior commander who got killed, uh, with his family. Well, there were civilian casualties too, but yeah, of course there are errors. This is not a 100% precise operation, and it never is as long as we are in this current technology. There's a proper tracking or whatever, the proper um,
But
information.
would you say the IDF has conducted strikes against the homes of Hamas members, even if they know they're not present?
I'm not certain, but I wouldn't answer that clearly because I don't have clear answer for that. But
But would you say it's past the realm of possibility, or would you say it's possible?
it is. It certainly is.
Okay, and if they were to do something like that, would it be justified?
No,
So
I
you
mean,
gotta kind of square those two in the fact that
yeah,
the Israelis
yeah.
have
I agree, but still, it's a it's an enemy force. If especially if they're a senior commander, I'm not talking about political ones. Yes, of course, there is no political member in Hamas that they are not affiliated with the Al Qassam, with the military wing. But yes, there are errors, and of course, they can't be. No civilian casualty can be justified from either sides, and I am against cheering for that. And any sane and anyone who has 1% of humanity in themselves won't be happy for death of a civilian, even uh, wife of, I don't know, a the commander of Hamas, either political or military. But it's not something that you can just, it's not a binary thing that you can say it's good or it's bad. It is happening. It started by Hamas, and Israel is trying its best to eradicate Hamas somehow. But as we talked before, and as you mentioned before, I don't think there would be a 100% eradication because uh yeah, but what I mentioned about ISIS, there are still ISIS members. US the ex-president of the United States said that we ended ISIS. There are still ISIS members even in Egypt, even in Syria, even in Iraq. Same thing would imply to the Hamas case.
no, absolutely, and you will. I think that's another thing that we've already talked about, and so John sent me a message 10 minutes ago that we had to wrap up soon, but I'm gonna keep talking because I want to punish him. Um,
Yeah.
but I think there's a degree to which, and we addressed this earlier, but you'll never be able to get rid of Hamas like as an organization within the Gaza Strip and probably within the broader Palestinian territories to a degree. And if not the Palestinian territories, then Lebanon or Syria. Like they're going to exist in some level there. Um,
True. Obviously.
and the Israelis kind of have to approach that to a degree and consider what their operational intentions look like then. Um,
I
just
think
because
Israel's goal is to de-rocketify Hamas. Uh,
well, it's yeah, de-rocket or remove the and again they've said this, remove the capability of Hamas to attack Israel.
yeah, precisely.
I don't think
But
they'll ever be
yes,
able to do that completely though.
there is no such thing as like extinction of Hamas or ISIS, or this is an ideology. You can't wipe them off unless you wipe the ideology off.
Yeah,
Um,
and
so
I don't think the Israeli government wants to address a lot of the steps that would have to be taken to wipe the ideology out. And
you know this,
I'm not talking about genocide there. I'm talking about actions they would have to take to make the broader body of Palestinians amenable to
exactly,
the
this is a
existence of
twisted
Israel.
thing, and it's kind of tied. We are talking about Middle East. We're not talking about an a bunch of atheist states. Their beliefs and their religion is tied to them, the groups that they are members of. So the ideology of Hamas is not just the ideology of resisting what they call themselves Islamic resistance. Uh, it's it's not just something political. They think that this is their duty, this is their religious duty. They are performing jihad. So yeah, there is no complete you know you can't get rid of them completely, but you can you know you can stop them from being a serious threat. Yeah, of course, some of maybe one day we are seeing it every week, every month, that some person stabs one Israeli citizen, two Israeli citizens inside Israeli cities. So this is not going away, and it's not going to be stopped. But we are talking about something in a bigger scale, something that Hamas was capable of doing on October 7th. I assume that Israeli government and IDF goal is to stop Hamas from being a serious threat.
Yeah, no, I also believe that that is a goal currently by the IDF. Don't know exactly how they're going to get there,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
mean it.
definitely a stated goal. And I really don't think any of us know that, because, I mean, the resources just don't exist to, go door to door in Gaza and ask people if they support Hamas or know any Hamas members, or are they a Hamas member. Like, the Israelis don't have the resources to do that.
Yeah,
And
but
so
offering,
they're
trust me, offering some, uh, good advantages and good rewards can do that. Can turn people against each other. I mean,
I don't think you'll ever get to that point, especially within the Gaza Strip. I
and
just, if you look at the broader support, and if you look at the way that, especially the information environment within the Strip has been controlled and prepped by Hamas, um
yeah,
or
this. Remember, we talked. You and Dave were talking about just scratching the surface. This is something pretty much bigger than what we can uh talk about before John kills us. So
I think we're approaching it pretty quickly.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. This has been a much longer episode than normal, but as we said at the start of the episode, this is such a broad topic that we can only really scratch the surface
this
tonight.
is the first episode that I'm a guest in the Osint bunker with a diagnosed cancer, and I'm sorry for my coughs, and that's all. But
We're gonna link the fundraiser also below
actually, it was
this
pretty much
episode.
good. I finished my second cycle 2 days ago, 3 and 2 days ago. Actually, it was 2 days. It's all thanks to you guys and what's that word? Casus Belly, my
Yeah.
friend from, yeah, you know him.
Yes, yeah.
Uh, I'm using this mic to just say thank you all from what all you did, from the retweets to the to payments to support to codes, kind words, and whatever has happened. And it's a very 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 huge pleasure for myself and my life that I'm fighting for, because you supported and you kind of made it happen. Thank you so much.
Consider this in the most utilitarian way, us investing in you.
It
But
was
no, I really do hope things go as well as possible. It's good that things were caught early, and it's good that I think everyone came together.
Yeah.
yeah.
Indeed.
I hope we can continue this discussion. I know this is getting too long, but I'm not satisfied with where we are at right now, because I feel like we didn't reach a proper conclusion, and which right now we can't, because I'm foreseeing some ground operations, and that is going to happen according to the Israeli army with the leaflets that they dropped and lots of things. But I assume that this is going to be something that lots of people are rooting for to continue, and I'll be happy and I'll be honored to be involved in the next ones too.
Yeah, on that note, thank you again to Aleph and also to David from Aurora Intel for joining us for this episode. No doubt we will be discussing further either next episode or the following episode in regards to the ongoing situation and as things develop. As Technical said, we're going to link the fundraiser for Aleph's cancer treatment in the description of the podcast episode below. But with that, thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a rather much longer episode of the Osint Bunker podcast, but we hope that it has been interesting for you all, and we look forward to having you back on the podcast soon.